basically are the dilemmas that we are facing? What are the different important ethical approaches to ethical decision making? How can we overcome these ethical dilemmas? Ethical navigation wheel and overcoming the ethical dilemmas. Line Pain's concept of moral compass. Kidder's ethical checkpoints. And lastly, we'll discuss about ethical dilemmas, the stakeholder management and social accounting. So let us first understand what basically is an ethical dilemma. Whenever we are talking about dilemmas, we talk about different important things that goes on in our mind whenever we take a particular step. Dilemmas are nothing but the contradictions that goes on inside our mind whenever we enter into any type of activity. So when we talk about ethical dilemma, we talk about understanding important things that we should do, what is good for us, what is fair for us, what is bad. All of these things goes on operating when we go for decision making or when we go for taking certain step, and those are considered as dilemmas. So when I talk about ethical decision making is very important, or you may say decision making is very important, because when you go for decision making, we go for identifying different important steps that we have to take such that we can achieve our targets. So only achieving our targets should not be the sole criteria. We should achieve our targets again ethically. So ethical decision making is an essential aspect of both personal life and professional life, which is often scrutinized by those around us. People see us how we are growing, people see us how we behave, people see us how we operate, so on and so forth. So understanding what constitutes an ethical decision requires understanding of several important factors. Some of these factors include, first important is the other regarding actions. Different important utilitarian thinkers like Jeremy Bentham has divided the human activities into self-regarding and other regarding actions. Managers need to be very much conscious of other regarding actions, as they have the significant implication on the firm's legal and social obligation. So managerial decisions bears on social good, because if the manager would be good, if the manager's decision will be good, if the manager's decision will be fair, then it can be impacted good towards the society, thus making it crucial for the manager to consider the impact of their actions on the others. These are the other regarding actions. It involves what? It involves evaluating the stakeholders' impact, that is, assessing how the decision affects the employees, customers, shareholders, and the community at large. It also involves promoting fairness while undertaking the decision or undergoing the decision, that is, ensuring the actions and policies do not unfairly disadvantage or harm any group of people with whom we are interacting. Third is, we need to balance the interest of the people between the firm and those of the people who are external to us. Because if we can't balance the interest, we cannot give justice to the people who are investing and the people who are working in the organization. Second important aspect is availability of more than one choice while taking the decision. So ethical decision making also involves choosing between different options or multiple options, which have each one having its own moral implications. This availability of more than one ethical choices lead us to what? Lead us to ethical dilemmas, which requires a sense of moral judgment to prioritize our actions over the others. It includes moral judgment. What is moral judgment? Now, using the ethical principles to evaluate and prioritize our actions. Navigating our dilemmas, that is, recognizing and addressing the complexities of the ethical dilemmas. Third is, we have to understand the perception of our actions by the stakeholders. Stakeholders are very important because they are the people who are judging us, they are the people who are guiding us in the businesses. It's not sufficient to analyze the action solely through the lens of self-regarding. That is, I cannot, judge myself every time, or I cannot have an impression if I think I am right. Other people's impressions also matters. So it's not sufficient to analyze the action solely through the lens of self-regarding and other regarding perspectives. Managers must also consider other stakeholders' perceptions into actions. If managerial decision making impacts the welfare of different stakeholders and has ethical influence, a certain degree of managerial caution is required. So, what is this managerial caution? It involves the stakeholders' perception, the reputational impact that is having, the ethical implications that is happening. So, stakeholders' perception means understanding how the actions are viewed by others including whom? Including the employees with whom I am working, with who is working with me, the customers to whom we are giving our service, and the broader community who is expecting a lot from us. Reputational impact involves considering the potential impact on the organization's reputation and trustworthiness. Ethical implications involve recognizing and addressing the ethical concerns raised by the stakeholders. So, ethical decision making in management is not one way, it is multifaceted and it requires careful considerations of different factors. By being conscious of other regarding actions or navigating ethical dilemmas with moral judgment and considering the stakeholders' perception, managers can make the decisions that can uphold the ethical standards and contribute to the social good. So, while going for ethical decision making, we have to take every step to see that we are navigating our dilemmas with moral judgment, with taking into consideration our stakeholders' perception and taking the decisions with the ethical standards. Then only we can contribute the good towards the society and we can carry on with our businesses effectively. So coming to what basically is the ethical approach to how can we go for understanding this ethical decision, how can we go for taking ethical decisions, that is we need to understand the ethical approach to ethical decision making. So ethical decision making, one of the important aspects we can discuss here is ethical decision making and the workplace romance. So, according to Thomas Jones, who is a notable scholar in ethical decision making, he introduced a four-stage process such that individuals can undergo when making the ethical decisions. What are they? The first one is the moral recognition. Every individual has a morality. Recognize a moral issue. Recognize a moral issue. Second is moral judgment. Determine the most appropriate ethical choice. You have to judge. Moral intent. Establish a moral intention. Moral action means acting according to your intentions. So coming to the ethical issues, when we discuss about the ethical issues in the workplace romance often leads to ethical issues primarily when it involves the senior executives and the subordinates. Because why are we concentrating on it? Because when the senior executives will be involved in these nuances, then it will impact the people, it will impact the organization, it will impact the external people at large. So there are different type of situations that raise several ethical questions and dilemmas in this context. One is the conflict of interest, wherein the romantic relationships can lead to what will happen? It will lead to favoritism, impacting fairness on the other person and objectivity in the workplace. There will be abuse of authority, wherein the relationship between the superior and subordinate will involve power imbalances and potential exploitation would take place. Privacy versus professionalism, wherein balancing the private nature of romantic relationship with professional conduct and workplace policies will take place. Now, coming to the different important corporate policies that are being framed on workplace romance, corporate organizations are often implementing policies to address the romantic relationship among the employees for several reasons. The first important one is the sexual harassment prevention. Employers have a moral duty to protect the employees from sexual harassment and prevent adultery. Conflict of interest in specific sectors, romantic relationship may inherently conflict with the professional roles and responsibilities, which will again impact your mind. Workplace productivity. Now, when you are entering into this romance, it can be seen as a distraction from the flow of work, and this distraction will lead to reduction in the overall efficiency and productivity of the employee. Now, through this, again, workplace environment will be hampered. At the end of a workplace romance can create a hostile environment, and the relationship between the superior and subordinate can lead to grievances about favoritism. There are different important factors that affect the decision making, ethical decision making. These factors can be considered both from the individual and the situational point of view. The individual factors relate to the personal ethical characteristics of the decision makers. It comprises of ethical biases. It is influenced by natural traits and socialization process. Moral values, it comprises of the personal beliefs about what is right and what is wrong. So when I talk about the factors affecting the ethical decision making, it can be categorized, it can be thought of from two angles. One is the individual factor, which comprises of ethical biases and moral values, and second one is the situational factors, which it takes into consideration the incentive system. Incentive system involves rewards and the penalties that influence the behavior of the individual. Job roles, responsibilities, and expectations associated with specific position. Ethical climate, the prevailing ethical standard, and the culture within the organization. So situational factors can again be classified into issue related factors, context related factors. Now when I talk about issue related factors, it is relating to a specific ethical issue at hand. When I talk about the context, it is related to the broader part, like the broader context in which the decision is being made. So understanding ethical decision making or understanding ethical decisions requires both individual and situational factors. So by applying this Thomas Jones four-stage process and recognizing the complexity at the workplace, the manager can navigate from the ethical dilemmas more effectively. So and it is also seen that corporate policies that are being laid down also plays a significant role in maintaining ethical standards, balancing the personal freedom with professional responsibilities, and ensuring a fair and the productive workplace environment, which is the healthy environment is being created in the organization. Now, there are different important ethical approaches. There are different important ethical approaches to decision. Now, according to Mikkel Basson, wherein he discusses how ethical approaches can be adopted to improve decision making, labeling this challenge as a structuring problem. He suggests that ethical decision making can be enhanced by answering three fundamental questions. Ethical decision making can be undertaken by asking or by answering three fundamental questions. What I can do in this situation? What outcome will the action have? What outcome will the action have? And what is the goal? First is, what can I do in the situation? What will be the outcome of the action that I have done, that I have taken, and what is the goal? Now, the key stages to ethical decision making that is, What can I do in this situation? It is operating the decision problem. That is, I am identifying the decision problem. It involves what? Evaluating the feasibility of different type of actions that I can take for a particular situation. So for that reason, it includes what? It includes assessing the feasibility, determining what actions are possible in the given circumstances, weighing the options, objectively assessing the cost and benefits of each potential action, courage and fortitude, summoning to other determination to consider all the possible actions, including difficult or unpopular ones. Second is what next is what is the goal? That is establishing the moral intent. It involves clarifying the ultimate objectives behind the actions that I have taken. It includes determining the motives, identifying the underlying reasons and goals driving the decision, evaluating outcome, that is assessing the cost and benefit of the actions that I have taken for reaching the final goals, moral intent and will, committing to executing the chosen action based on clear ethical intention. Now, applying this Basson's framework to ethical decision making, to apply this framework, different important steps are being taken into consideration. First is identify the possible actions. Start by listing all the potential actions that can be taken in the situation. Different actions that I can take, but all the actions I can't take. So what I have to do now, I have to go for the next step, that is assessing the feasibility of which action I should take. That is evaluating the practicality of each action. All the things that I think I can do, I can't do because there are certain constraints. So what I have to do now, I need to evaluate the practicality of each action, consider the resources, constraints and other relevant factors. Next is we need to go for predicting the outcome. Before we take any action, we have to predict. And that is, we need to conduct a cost benefit analysis to understand the potential impact of each action. So what we need to do, we can go for again clarifying our goals, that is defining the ultimate objective and the desired outcome of the decision. Make a decision, that is choose the action that aligns based with the ethical principles and achieves the desired goals. Act with intent, that is execute the action that you have chosen with a clear understanding of its ethical implications and intended outcomes. So Basson's framework provides a structured approach to ethical decision making by encouraging the individuals to consider the feasibility of the actions that you take, predict the outcomes, clarify your goals, so on and so forth. So these questions, when it can be addressed, the decision maker can enhance the ethical reasoning and make more informed, just and fair decision. So this approach is particularly useful in complex situations. In complex situations where ethical dilemmas are prevalent, and it also helps to ensure that decisions are both effective and ethically sound. So Basson's framework is a structured approach to ethical decision making by encouraging the individual to understand the feasibility of the actions that you take, predict the outcomes of the action taken, clarify the goals that you are going to attain. Now coming to how can we go for overcoming the ethical dilemmas. We take insights from the different business ethics scholarship. Now what it is telling, in our daily lives we frequently face ethical challenges and dilemmas regarding to the right course of action. So and while going for personal decision making also, it impacts a lot, and our immediate circles with whom I am connected, it also impacts a lot whenever a decision is being taken, and professional decisions can also affect a larger ecosystem. For example, an engineer accepting bribes and compromising the safety, or a doctor prescribing unnecessary expensive drugs for the commissions, are the examples of the unethical choices in a professional capacity. So in the corporate world, the managerial decision making is particularly challenging due to the gray areas managers managers often encounter. So business ethics education emphasizes the importance of what? Importance of ethical decision making. So every aspect of whatever we do, we can do it in a better manner if we can understand it. So in order to understand, we have to go for education. So business ethics education emphasizes the importance of ethical decision making, which involves navigating various tensions. That is, the various tensions. Various tensions include what? Now, personal morality versus professional ethics, individual welfare versus community welfare, short term goals versus long term goals, corporate needs versus corporate greed, error in judgment versus arrogance. So when we are talking about the managerial decision making or the ethical decision making in management, the managers are tasked with maximizing shareholder return, while also it's not only maximizing the return but also fulfilling the legal and social obligations. Because if you are not legally correct, if you are not obliged towards the society, then your business will not run in the long run. It will not be sustainable. So this dual responsibility will often lead to ethical dilemmas, commonly referred to as the dirty hands problem, where the managers face conflicting duties. I have to complete this work, but in order to complete this work, I have to undertake a work which is not healthy, which is not ethical. So there comes the dilemma part. So according to Joseph Badaracco Jr., a prominent business ethics scholar, introduces the concept of four spheres of executive responsibility. First is individual values and ethical personalities. So managers bring their own ethical values to their roles, influenced by various ethical approaches such as consequentialist and or duty-oriented ethics. Now, rights of the shareholders and employees. Managers must protect and uphold the rights of the shareholders, employees, and customers. Otherwise, your business will not sustain. So, organizational values, it is influenced by Aristotle's virtue ethics, wherein the manager acts as the custodians of the organizational values. Virtuous conduct, according to Aristotle, is the habitual rather than a matter of choice, including more inertia. More inertia means more energy in, or you may say that more inertia in ethical dilemmas. Pragmatic decision making. Managers must balance competing values and pressures, sometimes acting as lion, which is an assertive, or a fox, that is cunning as the situation demands. Up to lion, you need to become a lion, or a fox in that situation. The situation you need to understand and you need to act accordingly. The different important theories of moral development that is being put forwarded. The first one is the Kohlberg's stages of moral development. Lawrence Kohlberg outlines three stages of cognitive moral development, because if you are not developed morally, you can't go for ethical decision making. So it comprises of three important stages. First one is the pre-conventional stage, where the moral development is driven by deterrent effect of punishment. By punishing the people, suppose they are not they are not doing the work in a particular manner. That is the pre-conventional stage. Conventional stage, morality is shaped by different important social modes and the desire to maintain systems integrity. Now, post-conventional stage, here what happens? The individual develops a sense of personal obligation. Individual develops a sense of personal obligation to engage in actions benefiting others, adhering to a social contract, adhering to a social contract with society. This is the post-conventional. Now, next we have the James Rest four-component model. He identifies four components for ethical decision making. The first one is the moral sensitivity, that is awareness of the conflicting ethical values, awareness of the conflicting ethical values that an individual might face and the impact of one's behavior on the other. Second is the moral judgment, while choosing the best course of action based on moral reasoning and evaluating different aspects of an ethical problem. Moral motivation, that is driven by rewards and emotions motivating ethical actions. And last is the moral character, that is the integrity and the strength that we follow in undertaking the activities. So there are different important behavioral insights into this decision ethical decision making made. So recent behavioral psychology insights the challenge the traditional views on moral reasoning judgment. The social it includes the social institutions, institutionaries. This group argues that moral judgment precedes moral reasoning. Moral judgment precedes moral reasoning. So, according to them, what is moral reasoning? It serves as an ex post facto justification for initial intuitive judgment. A judgment, when we go for taking a judgment, what is operating behind? That we have to identify. The practical steps that are being taken into consideration while going for ethical decision making are recognize the first and very important thing is the dilemma that is going on in your mind. You have to make it clear. So what we have to do, we need to go for recognizing the ethical dilemma, that is acknowledge the presence of conflicting ethical values. Then we go for evaluating the possible actions, that is assess the feasibility, cost and benefit of the potential actions taken. Predict the outcomes, conduct a thorough, I've already discussed this, conduct a thorough cost benefit analysis to understand the potential impact of each action on the organization. Clarify the goal, define the ultimate objectives and the desired outcomes that we will be reaching in the due course of decision making. Make a decision, so and then you go for choosing the action that aligns best, with the ethical principles and achieves the desired goals. Achieve the desired goals. So in general, it is telling that whenever we are going for decision making, we need to go for another important aspect. Make it after making a decision, we go for act with intent. That is execute the chosen action that we have taken with a clear understanding of what it is having the implications and what are the intended outcomes reached or not. So overcoming the ethical dilemmas requires a nuanced understanding of both the individual and the situational factors, along with the robust moral reasoning and judgment. So by applying the insights from scholars like Kohlberg, Rest and Badarko, managers can navigate ethical challenges with greater clarity and integrity. So ethical decision making is not only about choosing the right course of action. Ethical decision making is not only choosing the right course of action, but also about fostering a habit of virtuous conduct that aligns with both the personal and the organizational values. Because if we cannot adjust ourselves with the organizational values, organizational settings, then it will be difficult for us to carry forward with them. So when ethical decision making is not only about choosing the right course of action, but also inculcating a habit in us for the virtuous conduct that aligns with the personal and the organizational values. There are different important key factors in the ethical decision making. Now we have this utilitarian thinkers like Jeremy Bentham. He emphasizes the distinction between self-regarding and other-regarding actions. Self-regarding and other in when we go for ethical decision making, other self-regarding actions and self-regarding actions are nothing but that is impacting me. Other regarding actions are what is the impact of others. So for managers, it means assessing the impact on the stakeholders. So managers must evaluate how their decisions is going to impact the employees, customers, shareholders, and communities. So in general, it is telling that whenever we are going for this decision making, we have to take into consideration the different important people who are involved in the decision making process. Because if the decision making process goes wrong, it will be difficult for us to access the businesses. Now we will be discussing the different the one of the important, the ethical navigation wheel, and how we can overcome the how we can overcome the or how we can overcome the ethical dilemmas. So in that we will be discussing that how through this navigation wheel we can understand the challenges that the organization faces when it is going for this decision making process. So in the due course of time, we have to understand that that in order to go for decision making, we have to take into consideration the law, we have to take into consideration the identity, we have to take into consideration the morality, we have to take into consideration the reputation and the economy, the ethics, so on and so forth. So when we are talking about this will we find out that this decision making that we take this the decision making that we take is very very important, because it impacts a lot to the organization and the individual with who it involved. So when I talk about the law, for example, if a manager faces an ethical dilemma, one can begin by asking whether the managerial action is legally acceptable or not, whether the managerial action is legally acceptable or not. Sometimes what happen, we take the decision, the managers take the decision without understanding the law. That will again create a problem. And but the manager is obliged to fulfill the legal obligations of the firm and ensure that his actions do not violate the law of the land. Now next is we have to then the next one is the identity. Also we have to take into consideration. When I talk about identity, I talk about mapping this with the values. So different professions can identify with a separate set of values. For example, it is expected that the professionals in the finance and accounting are objective and transparent, and health professionals are expected to prioritize the ethics of care. Therefore, the manager need to map their decision making with the values of the industry. Next, coming to the morality. Morality is if it is right or wrong. It reflects on whether the decisions aligns with the personal morality shaped by socialization and cultural context, and recognize the moral perceptions which can vary significantly across the cultures. Reputation. That is the next is reputation. That is the impact of the goodwill. Next is impact of the goodwill, that is considering how the decisions will affect the firm's public image. And in the age of social media, reputational damage can occur swiftly and have significant consequences. So effective stakeholder management is very much crucial. Next, coming to the economy, that is the impact. What is its impact? What is the impact of the decision making on the firm's profit? But that is balancing the corporate's profitability with the ethical outcomes. This is often the most challenging aspect, requiring the managers to find a compromise between the economic and the ethical considerations. And the last one is the ethics, that is challenging, that is the challenge of justifying, that is the challenge of justifying. Now justify what? Now justify the choices. It requires two principles. One is the principle of equality, another one is the principle of publicity. When I talk about the principle of equality, that is we need to treat the similar cases equally unless there is morally relevant difference. For example, distinguishing between a gift and a bribe. distinguishing between a gift and a bribe, that involves assessing the givers and the receivers motives and the timing of the gift that we get. Next is the principle of publicity. We should ensure that we should ensure that our actions can be defended publicly. Whatever action we take, I can defend it publicly without moral guilt. Without moral guilt, if one confidently justifies their decisions to colleagues and loved ones, the action are likely to be ethical. So there are different important, practical applications of the ethical navigation wheel. When facing with the ethical dilemma, the managers can use this ethical navigation wheel to guide the decisions that we take in the due course of action. So when I talk about it, I take into consideration to assess the legal compliance, that is ensuring the proposed action is legally sound. Proposed action is legally sound. Yes. Proposed action is legally sound, and second is aligning with the professional values, wherein we need to map the decisions against the values and the ethical standards of the profession and or industry. The third is we need to evaluate the personal morality, wherein we need to reflect on whether the decision aligns with the personal moral beliefs. Next is we need to consider the reputational impact, that is anticipate the potential effects of the firm's reputation and the stakeholders perception. When we next point is we need to go for weighing the economic implication, that is we need to balance the financial impact with the ethical consideration, seeking a solution that justifies both. Next is justify ethically. Use the principles of equality and publicity to justify the decisions publicly and confidently. So, this ethical navigation wheel is very important as it provides a structured approach for the managers to address the ethical dilemmas comprehensively. So, by considering the legal, professional, moral, reputational, economic, and ethical aspects, managers can navigate from the complex ethical landscape and make decisions that uphold both personal and organizational integrity. Before that, we have to also take into consideration the point that whenever we go for decision making, we have to be very much confident in taking the decision right. So this wheel, ethical navigation wheel, is very important in it. Now we were discussing about ethical decision making, how we can overcome the how we can overcome the ethical dilemmas. We can overcome the ethical dilemmas We can overcome the ethical dilemmas by incorporating one of the important theories that we can also take into consideration while going for this ethical decision making. The theory is being put forward by Kohlberg, where Lawrence Kohlberg outlines the three stages of cognitive moral development. One is the pre-conventional stage, second is the conventional stage, and the post-conventional stage. In pre-conventional stage, the moral development is driven by the deterrent effect of punishment. In conventional stage, morality is shaped by the social mores and the desire to maintain system integrity. And post-conventional stage, the individuals develop a sense of personal obligation to engage in actions benefiting others, adhering to a social contract with society. We also need to understand the rest four component model, which comprises of moral sensitivity, moral judgment, motivation, and moral character. There are different important behavioral insights also we have to take into consideration while decision making, ethical decision making, where the recent behavioral psychology insights the challenge that traditional views on moral reasoning and judgment. It comprises social intuitionist practical steps for for ethical, because whatever things we think or whatever things is there in the theory, all the things cannot be implemented. So we have to navigate the ethical dilemmas effectively by taking into consideration different important steps. First is we need to understand, or we need to recognize what is the ethical dilemma. We need to evaluate the different course of actions. For example, assess the feasibility, cost and benefits of potential actions. We need to predict the outcomes. We need to clarify our goals, make a decision and act with intent, that is executed the chosen action with clear understanding of its ethical implications and intended outcomes. Now this is how we can go for understanding the dilemma, how to come out of it, the dilemma. We also understood through this navigation wheel, ethical navigation wheel, how we can go from the dilemma to perfection in the decision making process. Another important person who is there, who is also helping us in taking the decision very effectively. He is from Harvard University. His name is Lan Pan, who offers a four-part moral compass for guiding the managerial decision making. His framework encourages the managers to integrate ethical considerations into every decision that is being taken, aligning closely with the Edward Freeman's stakeholder management theory. Uh, here there is integration thesis by Edward Freeman. Edward Freeman's integration thesis comprises of two premises. One is every business decision has to have a moral component, and every ethical decision in the managerial capacity has a business component. So Freeman emphasized the responsibility principle, which calls on the managers to accept the responsibility of the actions that they take and open the questions for argument, urging the managers to engage in self-examination. For whom is value created and destroyed by a decision? Who is harmed and who is benefited, whose rights are upheld and whose rights are violated, what kind of person will I become if I make this decision. If this thing comes in your mind, you can well understand if I am taking the decision right or not. Now, according to Line Page, there are four frames of reference that can help the managers to ensure their decisions are ethically sound and consider the broader impact on the stakeholders. The purpose is, will this action serve a worthwhile purpose? The objective is to analyze the both short-term and long-term consequences. Critical analysis is we need to determine if the results are worth pursuing or not. Principle says, is the action consistent with the relevant principles? Now it considers what? Ethical concepts. It includes what? It considers the norms of good governance, legal and social obligations, and the firm's code of conduct. Principle is this action consistent with the relevant principles? We need to understand the ethical concept, that is, consider the norms of good governance, legal and social obligations, and the firm's code of conduct. Principle consistency, it ensures the action aligns with the established principles. Stakeholder impact, does this action respect the legitimate claims of the people affected? That is, we have to understand the empathy and sympathy. That is, we need to cultivate understanding of the impact on the stakeholders. Legitimate claims such as that assess the respect for stakeholders' rights and interest. Now, authority, do I have the power to act or not? Or do we have the power to act or not? So what we have to do, we have to go for self-examining. That is, critically, I need to evaluate the manager's ability and authority to influence the outcome. Now, what will be the influence? Managerial influence. It will determine the extent of power and responsibility in making the decision. Now, how can we apply this Payne's moral compass? We can apply this or use this Payne's moral compass, where the manager should evaluate the purpose, that is consider both the immediate and the long term, that is the both the short term and long term impact that will have, and determine if the actions are aligning with the organizational goals and values. We need to understand the or examine the principles. We need to review the ethical guidelines and principles relevant to the decision, ensure the action adheres to legal and social standards. Next is assess the stakeholder impact, identify all the stakeholders who are being affected by the decision. Evaluate how the action will respect or infringe on their rights and claims. You cannot go for charging. You cannot go for doing certain actions which will affect the rights and claims. Next is we need to confirm authority. That is, we need to reflect on the manager's authority and the capacity to implement the decision. We need to consider consider the potential influence and the consequences of the decision taken. So, Penn's moral compass provides a structured approach for the managers to navigate in the ethical decision making process. So this by considering the purpose, the principles, the stakeholder impact, the authority, the managers can take the decisions that are ethically sound and beneficial to both the organization and the stakeholders. So this framework ensures that ethical considerations are integrated into every aspect. Ethical considerations are integrated into every aspect of managerial decision making, thus promoting responsible and effective leadership. It is suggesting that if with the authority ethics is involved, then we can go for good decision making, we can go for effective leadership, and the manager will be an effective. Next, coming to another important person who helps in understanding these dilemmas and coming out of and going for effective ethical decision making is Rushworth Kidder. He is an ethicist who proposed a structured 9-step approach to navigate the complexity of the ethical decision making. His checkpoints are designed to guide the individuals through a thorough and reflective process, ensuring a comprehensive consideration of the ethical issues. It comprises of the nine steps comprises of, first one is moral awareness or sensitivity. The objective is to recognize the presence of a moral issue. The action is develop the sensitivity to ethical dilemmas in various situations. Determine protagonist. The objective is to identify the individuals involved and ensure they are taking the responsibility of the actions. Action is confirmed that the subject understands their role and responsibility in the ethical issue. Next is gather the relevant facts. The objective is collect all the pertinent information or facts before making a decision. So what will be the action? Address information asymmetry and ensure a comprehensive understanding of the situation. Right versus wrong. The objective is determine if the issue is a right versus wrong dilemma. And then we go for applying the action is we go for applying the fourfold test. One is the legal test. Is it legal? Second is the smell test or the taste test. Does it feel right to take it? Front page test. Would it be comfortable for an individual to take their actions to make it public? Then mom and aunt test. Would your mother or favorite aunt approve of it? So when I talk about there are different type of paradigms that comes. One is right versus right paradigm. The objective is identify the type of ethical dilemma. Action is you classify the dilemma as justice versus mercy, short term versus long term, trust versus loyalty. When I talk about justice versus mercy, I talk about fairness versus compassion. Short term versus long term, I talk about immediate versus future consequences. Truth versus loyalty, I talk about honesty versus allegiance. Now, then we go for applying the checkpoints at number 4 and 5. The objective is use the right versus wrong and right versus right test to analyze the issue. Now, what action we take? We evaluate the ethical dilemma using the established test. Now we go forward. We move beyond the dilemmas to trilemmas, wherein the objective is expanding the thinking to create or find or create solutions. We use moral imagination to explore out of the box solutions. because if you go traditionally, we may not be in a position, we will be taking by, we have binary choices. If you go for out of the box solutions, we have different choices. So while making a decision, the objective is we arrive at a conclusive decision, and the action is we decide upon the best course of action taken based on the analysis. Next is reflect and follow up. The objective is reflect on the decisions and its outcome. Action is revisit the decision to assess its impact and learn from the experience. So, C. Johnson, again in his book on organizational ethics, a practical approach, also offers a five-step approach to ethical problem solving, complementing Kidder's checkpoints. First one is identify the problem. Second is investigate the problem. Third one is innovate the solution. Then find out the or isolate the best solution, and then you go for implementing the solution. Now, how are we going to apply this Kidder's checkpoints? We can apply it where the manager should cultivate moral awareness. He should stay vigilant and sensitive to the potential ethical issues in various scenarios. Identify the stakeholders. Ensure comprehensive understanding of, and that means you need to gather all the information and address any gaps in the knowledge. Apply ethical test, classify ethical dilemmas, expand the problem solving, and make informed decisions. The decisions has to be informed. Okay. So coming to the ethical dilemmas, stakeholder management and social accounting. Now, in the increasingly complex ecosystem where business operate, managers often face ethical dilemmas due to evolving legal and social obligations. So this environment includes new regulations driven by national security considerations and activism from the civil society organizations, making ethical performance a critical aspect of managerial responsibilities. So, to address these challenges, various initiatives in social auditing, environmental auditing, sustainability reporting, and ethical auditing collectively are being referred to as social accounting. So, the activities that I take the responsibility and to what much, to what extent I am accountable. So, what is social accounting? According to Crane and Matten, social accounting is the voluntary process that is concerned with assessing and communicating the organizational activities and the impacts on social, ethical, and environmental issues that is relevant to the stakeholders. So, despite its popularity, there is no consensus on what constitutes social accounting, and the absence of formal standards and established assessment parameters also add to its complexities. However, social accounting primarily involves what? Now, stakeholder consultation and dialogue, reflecting how managers as agents of the firm handle ethical dilemmas. So these are summarized as stakeholder management. The different important factors that drive the social accounting. One is the increased pressure. Yes, increased pressure from external pressure. It can be external pressure, government, civil society organizations, social media, industry associations, consumers. Internal pressures include employees and shareholders. And then the different important factors that drive the social accounting can be increased pressure, can be risk identification. Now, the managers are, role of the managers, where managers are perceived as ethical drivers and change agents representing the organization. Ethical decision making is crucial as it aligns the firm's goal with the financial performance, environmental contribution, and societal contribution. The ethical orientations of the managers, where managers can relate their constituencies from the broad orientation, that is adopting it will be immorality, because it may, while adopting unethical approaches and consciously engaging in practices against the principles of justice and fairness. Now, morality is indifference of negligence towards stakeholders' interest, prioritizing economic interest over ethical considerations. Morality is incorporating ethical practices, establishing transparent code of conduct, fair treatment of shareholders, employees, customers, and other vital stakeholders. Now, coming to the complex, different important complex ethical dilemmas, Corporate ethical dilemmas often involve difficult choices among divergent interests, requiring managers to balance between the competent or you may competing constituencies. So, ethical decision making is frequently, compromised by ignorance and bias, hindering moral awareness. However, various ethical principles and tests help the managers to navigate these dilemmas by minimizing the biases. The models and tests that are being used by models like ethical navigation wheel that we have already discussed, and others provide a framework for dissecting the ethical issues, the dynamic nature of the business landscapes, and varying urgencies make it challenging to develop objective criteria for resolving the dilemmas. Nevertheless, these models and tests are valuable tools for managers, enable them to confront the different important ethical dilemmas that arise with greater empathy and informed reasoning. So, ethical decision making in business requires a robust understanding of the stakeholder. Okay, so ethical decision making in business requires a robust understanding of the stakeholder manager, how we are going to manage the people, how we are going to manage the mind, what type of moral principle I have to adhere to, what type of things I have to keep in my mind, and also I cannot, avoid this social accounting. The managers must navigate the complex ethical landscapes by balancing the legal, social, and economic considerations while maintaining transparency and accountability. If you are transparent in the businesses, in the things that you do, you will never feel guilt. Accountability also, if you have of the actions that are being taken or of the responsibility that we have taken, then the decision making will be correct. So by employing the ethical principles and models, the managers can better address ethical dilemmas. By employing the ethical principles and models, the managers can better address the ethical dilemmas, fostering a more ethical and sustainable business environment. So, in general, it is telling that whenever we are going for this whenever we have ethical dilemmas, we have to keep in our mind that there are certain things which is operating, which is called as the morality. You cannot avoid that and go for decision making. So there are different important, keywords that we use. There are different important keywords that we have used in this chapter. The first one is the ethical decision making. It recognizes the condition that is requiring reviewing of all the actions that we can take, and thus eliminating the unethical views and choosing the best ethical order. Because all the things will come, but unless and until you are fair in taking the decision, you are ethical in taking the decisions, you should not take the decision. Now, ethical dilemmas are nothing but the dilemmas that take place while going for decision making, where any of the available options requires the agent to violate or compromise on their ethical standards. These are called as the dilemmas. Now, ethical navigation wheel, we also discussed it. It offers a framework for analyzing the concrete ethical dilemma. Moral compass is the person's ability to judge what is right and what is wrong and act accordingly. Then we have the social accounting. You already know that whenever we undertake a business, we have to be accountable to the society of the responsibility that we have taken. So it is the measurement and reporting of the information concerning the impact on the entity and its activity on the society. If you cannot be answerable to the society, society will raise questions against your transactions on the businesses that you take. And when the society raises questions on the transactions of the businesses that you make, it will be difficult for you to sustain your business. So ethical, in order to go for ethical decision making, you have to take the responsibility, and you need to be also accountable in the decisions that you are taking. So by employing the different important principles, and models, the manager can better address the ethical dilemmas, foster a more ethical and sustainable business environment. So in general, it is telling that whenever we are going for ethical decision making, we have to understand the ethical dilemmas. We have to find out from those dilemmas what we need to do and what would be good for us. So the different important models that we discussed in the due course of time has to be taken into consideration very carefully and seriously, such that we can incorporate it further in our due course of action. So in general, I would suggest that whenever we go for ethical decision making, we have to take the help of these models, such that we have to take the help of the moral values, we have to take the help of the complexity of the situation, we have to analyze the situation, we have to understand the situation better, so that we can go for the decision making effectively. So because of there is a faster pace of the development taking place, we cannot only consider that with this development we are going to attain success. Only development by only attaining the success or only attaining the profit should not be the criteria. Rather, we have to take the we have to be accountable for whatever steps that we take for attaining the profit. So thank you so very much for listening from me. So we have completed chapter 3 of this particular module of this particular paper, wherein we have understood what are basically ethical dilemmas. So after this, we can have a yardstick to understand, to measure what are the things we are going to take into consideration before going for implementing decision making. So decision making is okay, but if ethics is involved, then the business will be a sustainable one. So thank you so much for listening, and hope you all have understood the chapter.